now we're going to review these two buttons, which is the reference coordinate system and the pivot point center. So what is a reference coordinate system? Well, we have a view, a screen, and a world. Let's look at world first. So one thing you should be aware of is you can see that when I change these different transform modes, the reference coordinate system changes with it. It defaults to view. So if I change this one to world and then go back to that one, you can see that's now at local. And if I change that one back to, say, screen, that's at world, and that's now at screen. So you really have to be conscious about what you're doing, because when you're flicking around these buttons it can get a little bit confusing. So make conscious decisions about which pivot point system you want to use and log it in your brain somewhere. Okay, so now we're let's just set all these to world so it doesn't get confusing. Right, so I'm going to go to front view by pressing F, and then I'm just going to hide everything by doing hide unselecting. So here, go to displays panel and then do hide unselected. Okay, so now we can sort of see what we're doing. And our character, this is his axis here. And if I go right click on there, you can say it's absolute world. So let's set that to 0, 0, 0. And that puts his axis on the center of the world, like that. And the world is represented by this big grid here, and the y-axis of the world goes that way and the x-axis of the world goes that way. Simple. So let's look at local. So this is the local axis of the character. His y is going up and his z is going forward. If I rotate him like this, you can see that this is still in the world coordinates, so nothing seems to be happening. But when I go back to here, this is now rotated because this character is rotated. So our character hangs off this transform gizmo here, and wherever the character goes, wherever the transform goes, our character is taken with it, like this. Okay, so we also have screen. Screen is always aligned to the current view, like this. So y is always up and x is always to the right. And as I rotate, the axis realigns so that I know that I'm now moving in the plane of the screen whenever I drag something. And that can be really helpful when we're doing certain kinds of modeling. And then we have view, which is somewhat hard to explain but easier to use. It's kind of default setting, and essentially what it means is y is always up and x is always to the right in the current view. So if I set this to maybe back, so you can see y is up and there, and that's top, and you can see that now that has changed because I've changed this view and y is up in this view, and that just sort of keeps things consistent while you're working, and it's quite useful default for Max. Okay, so let's go back now. Let's zero this guy out, so we're going to put him at 0, 0, 0 there. And also in rotation. So another top tip is, let's click that to view world. Yeah, so you can see that down here we have various rotation values. If you right click on here, we can set that to 0, and then I can rotate the character back up again to 90. So I'm in move mode, so I can just right click, set that to 0 like that. Okay, so let's maximize that viewport. There we go. So let's look at these things. So we have use pivot point center. So that's the pivot point of the current coordinate system. So if it's if we're here, we're in view mode, and we move it to like that. That is the center of the character, and this is actually the center of the current coordinate system. So that the view is somewhat like the world. That's going to stick it by the bottom here. Here is the center of the currently selected object, and here is the pivot point of the object. So if I move this character over here, that's his pivot point. That's his center, and that is the center of the reference coordinate system there. So if I change this to world, you can see that that doesn't move, but if I change it to local, then we know that that's the center of our character, and that is the same as that, which is the character's pivot point. If I set this to screen, then that's still centered on our character's pivot, but if I set it to here, it will always be the center of the screen, so you can see it snaps back to the center of the screen, like that. There we go. So that is the reference coordinate system and the transform coordinate center. Oh, wait a sec, there's one last thing we should know. So if I do this to view, see? So I'm just going to shift drag our character across, and if I shift drag, I'll create a clone. Okay, let's maybe make another one like that. So we've got 3 guys here now. If I select multiple objects like this, I can go through the pivot points like that, like this. So this is the selection center for multiple objects, which is there. This is all their pivot points, like that. And again, this is the pivot point of the world here. If I rotate, this has interesting effects. So this is the, let's go to view. So this is the rotation of the characters, the center of the selection, like that. So that kind of does something expected. This is the rotation of around the world, so I can drag this and that works as expected as well. And then this is kind of fun. So now if we choose pivot points, then we've got each pivot point rotating individually, so you get this result. And that's quite useful for certain situations. Okay, so there we go. We have got reference coordinate system, and we have the pivot point center for single objects and now multiple objects as well.